Big news, America! Wegovy now comes in a pill.
Did you know Autotune can be used on instruments? Let me show you how I transform this synth loop with Autotune Pro. Pull up Autotune Pro. I've got the input type set to instrument here, and then I turn the retune speed all the way up. We're transposing it up too. What happens when I put these two things together? And I'm going to copy it again, but we're going to drop it an octave.
What's good with it? What's good with it? What's up with it? You know, every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock p.m. is Live Talks from Low. Your boy Loretta Zombie. Same time and place unless I say otherwise. If you're just tuning in, appreciate you tapping in. You know, drop a comment in the chat and let me know where you're watching from. And, you know, you see the question on the screen. If you're on Twitch or if you're on YouTube, name a hip hop album that you think is no skip. I'm going to talk about albums today that are no skip. If you follow me on Threads, last week I made a post about I had people name an album that was no skip. Say name a hip hop album that was no skip, and I got a whole bunch of comments. And a lot of people said Get Rich or Die Trying, Good Kid, Mad City. A lot of people said Nas Illmatic. A lot of people said Midnight Moon Raiders. Tribe Called Quest. A lot of people said Tupac, All Eyes on Me, Be Against the World, Biggie, The Sky's the Limit. So there's a lot of great albums on that chat, and I'm gonna name a few that are no skip with me. Some are new school, some are newer, some are in the past, and a lot of them old school. You know, I'm a huge DMX fan. A lot of people, some people say it is Dark as Hell is Hot, which I agree with. Somebody said Flesh from Blood of My Blood. Some people said Muddy Waters. Some people said Eminem Show. There's a lot of great albums. You know, if you follow me on Threads, go to that post. It was from last week, and you know, leave a comment on that, or if you're just tuning in, watching the replay of this live, later on, you catch the replay of the live later on, leave an album that you think is no skip and tell me why. You know, I might agree with you, I might disagree with you. And some of the albums I might say that I think is no skip might piss some people off, or some people might agree. And I will say this, though, that there's a possibility that just because you think an album is no skip, does not mean everybody else is going to think the album is no skip. So somebody might say, oh, The songs are skippable. And let's be for real, to be honest, you go back and listen to some of the albums that we call classics. Some of them albums had some fillers. We can admit that. I can admit that some of the albums had some fillers, and even for some of my favorite rappers that I listen to, yeah, I can say some of the albums had fillers. Like that song really wasn't that great. We might call it no skip because it's a classic and because we really like the album and we really like the artist. I'm sure we all been guilty of that. Of course, you're gonna say, like DMX is my favorite rapper, so of course I'm gonna say Dark as Hell is hot. Or he ain't got no skills. Flesh of my flesh, blood on blood. He ain't got no skills. But somebody might point it out, listen to it, say, "Hey, I really didn't like this song, so I skipped it." And don't make no excuses now. If there's no skip, you got to be an album that you completely listen to with no skips, no excuses. But I skipped this on live. The no skip album is an album that you play straight through that you have no skips. I'm not saying every once in a while you might jump to the song that you really want to listen to sometimes. I mean, I even do that, but I mean, a no skip album is an album that really has no skips. And tonight I'm going to talk about some albums that questionably has some skips on it, that has some fillers that people might not want to admit. And that's okay, but that's what we're talking about. And if you want to join me on the live as well, let me put this comment back up here. You can join me on the live as well. But we're going to get into the topic, and I'm going to leave this up here for a little bit. Anybody wants to join me on the live, you can click that link and join me on the live and share your thoughts. Now, just to let you know, like I was saying earlier, we're talking no skips today. And if it got one skip on it, then it's disqualified as a no skip album. And you can come name some in the chat, and I can tell you had a skip or not. Or I think it's a no skip album. We can have a good debate without assaulting each other, people's intelligence. We can have a good debate. I don't mind a good debate. Argue your point. Argue your case. Stand on it. Stand on business. If you think that album really is a no skip, stand on business. Argue, substantiate your opinion. Let's hear it. And to be honest, I don't care how legendary that it is. And if it's a no skip, I better come correct in this chat. And just letting you know. And I have my reasons why too. Trust me, I have some good reasons why too. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking nothing. I'm not knocking nobody's music taste or nothing, because everybody has different music tastes, and that's the beauty of art. It's subjective. Like I said in my last episode and the episode prior to that, art is subjective. And we're selling this today. So if you skip one song, it's not a no skip. No excuses. Let's put that out there. You skip a song, there's no excuses. Now, I'm gonna share my picks first, and you can let me know in the chat if you feel like there are no skips though. But more than likely, these albums are very much loved in hip hop. And I'm only naming a few because I could be up all day naming no skip albums, and I probably missed some too. So I could name some. So here we go with my picks. So my first pick is DMX. It's Dark as Hell is Hot, no skips. Tupac, All Eyes on Me. Yeah, I said it. Tupac, All Eyes on Me is a no skip, even if it's a double disc. I know some people say, man, it got some skips. Disc 1 was better than disc 2. Nah, it had no skips on it. If you really sit back and listen to the album and listen to it a few times, you realize the album had no skips. That's a classic album. And I'm going to throw this out here. And it might be a serious hill to down. People say, oh, I down this hill. This is a hill I down. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Tupac fan too as well. I'm not saying this because, a lot of people put him up there as number one, the greatest rap artist of all time. But to be honest with you, really, the only double disc hip hop album of all time, really that was a no skip, was All Eyes on Me. I'm going to put that out there. You can clip that. You can clip that if you record it. You can clip that. I guarantee it. Some people might come from my head and say, man, you tripping, Lo. You crazy, man. You think All of Me is the only double disc that has no skip. Literally, in my opinion, that majority of the albums that we heard in hip hop that are classic albums, out of all the classic double disc albums, Tupac, All Eyes on Me is a no skip album. It's the only double disc that's really no skip. That I can legitimately say that is no skip. That legitimately I could play both discs through and have no skips. That was a classic. And I feel a lot of people probably agree with that too, because, and to be honest with you, that album went diamond, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the first double disc to go diamond, if I'm not mistaken. And somebody could correct me wrong in the chat. If you catch it later on, if you catch the replay, you can leave in the comments and say, no, actually, it was this album that went double disc. That was the first diamond album. But the first double disc album in hip hop to go diamond was Tupac's All Eyes on Me. And correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but hey, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, that album was the first double disc hip hop album that went diamond. And also another album that went diamond as well, 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, is also a no skip album. And to go with my last pick, more of a new school artist, where Kendrick been around forever, been around for a minute, over 10 plus years. I'm gonna go with Kendrick Lamar's album, Good Kid, Mad City. That's a no skip album. Some might disagree to say the album's boring or Kendrick Lamar music or he's weird and all that. But Good Kid, Mad City, that's a great debut album. That's one of the greatest debut albums in hip hop history, along with Get Rich or Die Trying, along with It's Dark as Hell Is Hot, along with Illmatic, and many others that I can sit here all day and name. That were debut albums for artists that was very, very well classics and no skips albums. Hell, I'll go with J. Cole. Throwing out an album that recently came out, J. Cole, The Fallout. That's no skip. In my opinion, that's a strictly no skip album, and that's a double disc. That's new. It's new still. And now people calling that an instant classic. I might put that up there with All Eyes on Me right there. How everybody went crazy off of it, because for a straight week, I'm sitting there listening to the album on repeat, and I still to this day keep listening to the album on repeat. I started from disc 1, I let it go on to disc 2, and don't skip a single track. It has something for everyone, and a lot of people don't agree with the album. I even did a podcast episode on that album, just talking about that album. So that goes to show you how much is a no skip, So we can put J. Cole up there too. So as well, and the only reason I didn't say he is first compared to All Eyes on Me, because that album just came out, so people are still digesting that album. People still going back and listening to it, and every time I go back and listen to it, I get a different opinion. at that. And I think that's part of a no skip album too. I think that makes for a great argument for a no skip album, when you can go back and listen to an album repeatedly after it's been out for some years, even out for some months or for some weeks. You can go back constantly listening to it back to back, and every time you go back, you get a new perspective or you get a new opinion on it. I could say that's a no skip album, because in order for an album to be no skip, it has to be listenable. You have to be able to listen to it again and again and again. So you got to put it on repeat without skipping the track and learning something else. That's how great of an album it was. And my picks as well, my picks that I pick, I feel like no skip albums, because those albums I can always go back and listen to straight through and get a different perspective from what that artist was talking about or what it comes from, or what was the theme behind the album. I love albums like that. Anytime an artist can sit there and have a theme behind the album, I can always pick up something new. Oh, this is what he meant. You might could be years later and say, oh, damn, I ain't never really thought of that. You might hear somebody else come with a different perspective. And that's what a no skip album has. No skip album is an album that people constantly bring up and talk about. And the albums that I mentioned in my picks were albums that a lot of people that I saw on that post on Threads I was talking about, that people commented, and I was like, well, these people got some good taste. A lot of people comment those albums, because I saw All Eyes on Me quite a bit. I saw Dark as Hell Is Hot quite a bit in the comments. I saw Get What You Die Trying a lot, and I saw Good Kid, Mad City a lot. I even saw Pit the Butterfly. I saw The Fall Off with J. Cole. I saw Drake's Take Care. That's another one. That's another pick, and that was shocking that a lot of people said Drake. Well, excuse me, let me take it back. Not shocking, because, Drake had his run back then. That's when Drake was at his peak. Take Care is a no skip album. Whether you like Drake or not, you got to admit it. And I would even throw this one out there that I think is a no skip album, not necessarily a top pick for me, but Nothing Was the Same. I feel like that album's no skip. I think that's one of Drake's best works, in my opinion. And that's the beauty of hip hop. Everybody's gonna have a different opinion of what they feel like qualifies for a no skip album. But as I said earlier, to qualify for a no skip album, you can't have a single skip or disqualified. It's disqualified. If the majority says it has a skip, it's disqualified. And trust me, a couple of your classic albums have some no skips. And I'm gonna have some pretty hot takes on here. So just telling you, brace yourself now. And to be honest, and like I said before, most albums got fillers, and double albums usually not no skip, which is true. With double albums, you might have like 28, maybe 30 songs, maybe 40 songs, and maybe like 10 of those songs gonna be skips, whether it was on the album two or maybe album one was better than this, or maybe album two didn't have as many songs that you could play through. And let's be honest, nothing, no real shot against screaming, but screaming kind of ruined albums. When you think about it, you're just saying things are classics. I could be guilty of this myself. Sometimes when you go back and listen to a classic album, sometimes maybe maybe I get a different opinion on it now that I'm older and say, maybe I was just saying that this is a classic because of nostalgia. And when I and don't get me wrong, I don't want anybody to take it wrong to saying screaming is bad. It's not good because without screaming, having instant access to these classic albums and these nostalgic albums that we grew up listening to, we wouldn't have that access or to listen to the music that our parents listened to or to go back to listen to this hip hop music that we grew up listening to even say is a classic. But I think it gives people that sometimes that illusion to say, oh, this is a great classic. And this is a great classic. It's only because, is it a classic because the simple fact that you got access to it and you can go back and keep listening to it on repeat without actually having to go onto the actual store to buy a physical copy or worrying about your disc getting scratched up, or it really was a classic, or you really still get that same feel that you was listening to when you first listened to. And to be honest, you never really get that first feel really when you hear an album. But sometimes you do if you haven't heard it in a while. But a lot of times, people say things are classic because of screaming numbers, and screaming numbers jump up. So that might make the album a classic, because new people are discovering that music. But that music been out maybe 10 years ago, and people moved on from that. And now that you have screaming in place, it can easily jack up the numbers to make an album seem like a classic when it really not, or better than what it really is. Because everybody's going to listen to it because maybe a song off the album got played in the movie or was used as a theme song, or somebody made a TikTok out of it, and now it's instant classic. Not necessarily. So I told you there's going to be some hot takes, Just because everybody's majority says a classic doesn't mean that it's not a select few to say, nah, there ain't no classic. And a lot of times it's just off nostalgia when people say the classics. And I've been guilty of this myself. I go back and listen to it. It's like, I remember as a kid, I had a different opinion. I don't get that same feeling that I got 20 years ago hearing this album. And if you're in the comments and watching this live, drop your no skip albums. And if you're watching the replay, you can still drop your no skip albums in the comments, and I still respond to and comment. Tell me why that you think this is a no skip. There's no wrong or right answers. I want to hear what other people think or what other people's thoughts on what they think is a no skip album, and you can tell me why. If you didn't agree with my picks, I'm going to leave them in the comments when I get done with the live and the replay. I'm going to leave in the comments to open up the chat and say, hey, these are my picks with no skips. You can tell me, did I get it right? Or you can tell me I got it wrong and explain why. Substantiate your opinion. I love to hear that. Because at the end of the day, that's why I got on Live Talks Low to create Live Talks Low, to connect with like-minded individuals, to hear people different opinions on what they feel like is a no skip album. And if there's anybody that's in here in the chat, you're watching and listening, or you're watching a replay of this, give me a album that's underrated, no skips. I love to hear that. It was an album that's no skip, you think it's underrated and a lot of people look over, or a lot of people might not deem as a classic, but it's actually a good album that got overlooked. Because, let's be honest, back in the 90s, early 2000s, in the golden era, what I like to call the golden era of hip hop, you had a lot of talent back then, and you had to be really good, Not saying the artists now are not good, but you had to be really good. You had to really be unique and set yourself apart. Now people have similar flows, similar music, or similar sounds, and it's cool. Back then you got considered biting. If you sounded like somebody or you had a similar style, you might get caught up for being biting or you and that artist going to have a problem, or having a verbal beef, on wax. So I love to hear your opinion on that. If there's anybody out there in the chat or watching it or watch this replay later on after I post it, leave an album that you think is underrated from an artist that's underrated that nobody really give his props to. And I just don't want to hear obvious ones, like, and I know some could say, your picks are obvious, it's obvious ones, but not necessarily, because not everybody might not agree that Darkest Hill is Hot is a no skip album. Some people might say My Flesh is My Flesh, Blood of My Blood is a no skip album for DMX. But me being a DMX fan, and if you're a diehard DMX fan like I am, you'll know Darkest Hill is Hot is a no skip album, and that's one of his best albums. And also debuted at #1 as well. And Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood debuted at #1 as well. So, you have to. Running this back. Let me see. Now, I have a question for you guys too. Before I get out of here, I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna stay up here for 30 minutes. But let me ask you this now. For closing, do you think an independent artist can drop a no skip album? We have independent artists like Tech N9ne, who's been a successful independent artist for over going on probably 30 plus years now. I know it's well over 20 plus years that he's been the most successful independent artist. Tech N9ne is a prime example, I think, of an independent artist that could give a no skip album. I love somebody in the comments to comment that, And as I said earlier, as somebody pick an underrated rapper, even though Tech N9ne is pretty much a well-known independent artist, he's still independent. He's not considered mainstream, So which brings me to my question. Do you think an independent hip-hop artist can produce a no skip album? Drop that in the comments. And if you're watching it live, you can drop it in the comments now. If you're watching on the replay, you can drop it in the comments later. And I love to hear, do you think an independent artist can drop a no skip album? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think so, Just because the artist independent may not be mainstream, but they got a cult like following like Tech N9ne does, Hopsin, you got Insane Clown Posse, you got Atmosphere, you got artists like Immortal Technique. I believe those guys are dropping no skip album because those guys are very talented. Listen to their music. MF Doom, Doomsday, that could be a prime example of an independent artist dropping a no skip album that's underrated. I think that album could be no skip. That could be considered no skip. If you're into that kind of music and you're a fan of MF Doom is a well-known independent artist as well. So I wonder somebody might name his album as a no skip album. Or Joey Cool. I want to hear it, everybody always holler mainstream albums, but look on the post, I heard a lot of mainstream albums, but I didn't really see any independent artist albums, and I don't think I seen a Tech N9ne album on there. And I believe I know Tech N9ne has a no skip album too. I think KOD is a no skip album, in my opinion. That's the original KOD. J. Cole has a version of KOD. And no shot at J. Cole, because I'm a J. Cole fan as well, but Tech N9ne actually had an album first called KOD. And that's a great album. I think people should listen to it. In my opinion, I'm gonna say it myself. I think that's a no skip album, and he's an independent artist. And a lot of his music is better than a lot of mainstream artists that people claim to be so great. I mean, people give him a chance. I know it might be a little rock and rollish, or it might be a little different, but hey, I think Tech-N9ne KOD is a no skip album from an independent artist. Clip that. So that's it I have for tonight. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Leave a comment. You can join in the conversation later on during the replay. You can tell me about my picks, because I'm going to leave a comment with my picks, and I'm going to pin it to the live to see what people think of my picks. And you can debate with me, say, "Oh, I don't feel that's no skip, though. I think it's not no skip because of this reason." But I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Appreciate you. And before I get out of here, I want to leave this up here. Now, if you want to be a guest on Live Talk So Low, the contact email to be a guest on Live Talk So Low is lorettasonly1@gmail.com. It's on the screen here. I'm going to leave this up for a moment for you guys to go ahead and put that in. You don't have to be a hip hop artist. You don't have to be a music producer, or you don't have to be nobody in the music industry. You know, I do open up the podcast for other topics outside of hip hop as well. You know, I like to kind of create diversity. But if you got a topic you want to talk about life or a debate or a question you think people will be engaged and want to talk to, come join me on it. Because I used to do that a lot on Instagram when I first started, you know. So, you know, tell your people, come on YouTube, because I'm on YouTube now, you know. I don't go live on IG anymore. I'm on YouTube and Twitch. So come on over, you know. And later on, if you're on Instagram, you might catch a clip, you know, come on to my YouTube channel and watch the full live. So I appreciate you guys. I'm out. Peace.